Part 39. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mocnu. Chapter 381. With Yuhei base as the center, extremely tragic battles are taking place in the battlefields on all sides inside and outside the walls. Humans and humans, humans and zombies, humans and black shadow monsters. Tens of thousands of people are fighting fiercely in the city called Yuhei. And in this battle, there are several directions where the energy fluctuations are the strongest. Inside the western wall, countless butterfly shadows are floating, and people's crazy roars can be heard wherever they pass. Countless humans' eyes are filled with madness that is more terrifying than zombies, and they start biting and fighting each other, and the battle is tragic. In the distance of the street where countless corpses are scattered, there is an extremely powerful soul fluctuation. The red-dressed girl surrounded by butterflies has a deep gaze, and around her are dozens of men with strange makeup. These men are slimmer than women, and their faces and expressions are exactly the same. Some have crazy smiles on their faces, while others have sad faces. And just a second after Dyer's vigilant eyes, these dozens of men turned into after images. Then, hundreds of identical weird men were split into clones. Although these men had different expressions, their eyes looking at the red-dressed girl surrounded in the middle were full of perverted extreme colors. Dyer's eyes were rarely alert, and she controlled countless butterflies to hit these perverted men who had split into clones. However, when the butterflies hit these clones, they exploded into a ball of blood mist, and pink powder flew away. There was no reaction when they fell on the bodies of these perverted men. No, when the blood mist that could affect the soul fell into these clones, these men with perverted expressions on their faces became more extreme. The crazy clone laughed loudly, while the crying clone wailed continuously, and the energy fluctuations emanating from the body became more and more staring. After the two perverted men turned into countless clones, the strength of these clones did not seem to be weakened. The next second, these clones rushed hysterically towards the girl in the red skirt surrounded by me, stretching out sharp and narrow nails with mottled blood on them. Seeing this, Dyer summoned more demon butterflies to fly and resist. But strangely, the energy carried by the man's nails seemed to have a special restraining effect on the soul. The demon butterflies composed of countless souls were cut into two by countless sharp nails before they approached the man's side. And Dyer, as the butterfly's body, turned pale. These attacks can actually attack her body along the soul energy of the butterfly. Gradually, hundreds of men with perverted expressions on their faces cut off countless flying butterfly shadows. Getting closer and closer to the girl in the red skirt, the latter also fell into a desperate crisis. Above the wall in the distance, the camera of a flying drone flashed, quietly transmitting the pictures of these battles. In the command room of the base thousands of kilometers away, there were dozens of commanders who were responsible for transmitting messages and issuing instructions sitting cross-legged. They are the top think tanks from various bases, and now they gather together to make plans for the coalition's actions. On the main seat in the command room, Zhou Xiang, wearing a white coat, looked deep. In front of him was the scene of the girl in a red skirt being besieged by hundreds of perverted clones. The soul-devouring butterfly king, the main ability is to summon red soul butterflies to fight and invade the target's body. The target will be aroused to resentment and controlled by emotions at the least, and the soul will be devoured by the demon butterfly and die on the spot at the worst. Zhou Xiang knew Dyer's abilities like the back of his hand, and it was obvious that he had done sufficient research before. Then, he looked at the abnormal figure that had transformed into hundreds of clones. The Phantom Twins are twins. One can summon hundreds of clones without losing any strength, while the other specializes in emotional manipulation. When emotions continue to rise, the strength will also rise to the peak. The abilities of the two complement each other, just perfect to restrain the soul erosion of the soul-devouring butterfly emperor. Seeing the red-dressed girl retreating one after another under the siege of the Phantom Twins, Zhou Xiang turned his attention to the screen on the other side. As the screen moved, an indifferent figure in a white suit appeared inside. Not far in front of him, a middle-aged man in a tuxedo was smiling and elegant, holding a rose in his hand. The ability of the Lord of Wanhua City can just suppress the spatial power of the White Death God. Just like arranging troops, the coalition forces arranged opponents who could restrain the abilities of several destruction-level masters of the Yanjai dynasty. In the picture, Ji Yufeng's originally white suit was stained with large patches of blood and dirt, and his chest kept rising and falling. In front of Ji Yufeng, the Lord of Wanhua City in a tuxedo walked slowly. Under his feet were the corpses of countless Yuhei soldiers and surging black shadows. Without a word, Ji Yufeng's eyes flashed, and his figure disappeared in an instant. The fierce spatial ripples flashed frequently, turning into a white light that kept wandering in the air. The next moment, Ji Yufeng, holding the space-breaking blade, had teleported to the top of the tuxedo man's head. Countless white blades cut through the space and all fell on Shui Wanhua's body. However, in a flash, the man's body was scattered into petals all over the sky, with only countless sharp blades passing through the air. The scattered petals recondensed into the figure of the man in the tuxedo in the distance, looking at Ji Yufeng in front of him and smiling slightly. "You seem to have just broken through to the destruction level not long ago, and you can't even control the violent space energy in your body." Ji Yufeng's chest rose and fell violently, and his eyes were fixed on Shui Wanhua's condensed body. Continuously using the power of space also caused the energy in his body to be consumed violently. But Ji Yufeng's pupils condensed, the space energy in his body was compressed to the extreme, and his figure moved in front of Shui Wanhua in an instant. His figure turned into a residual image, and he used all his strength to drive the space-breaking blade in his hand, and countless sharp blades cut through the sky. This time, even the tiny petals were all cut into powder by the power of space. Ji Yufeng stopped in place, staring at the petal debris that was cut into powder in front of him with deep eyes. The idea is good, but unfortunately. Then, under Ji Yufeng's astonished eyes, the petal debris on the ground actually melted quickly and turned into a pool of dark green viscous solution. Let a junior like you see for yourself what a true destructive level warrior is. A pair of dark green pupils appeared on the solution monster, with undisguised greed and murderous intent in its eyes. It opened its bloody mouth like a ferocious beast and rushed towards Ji Yufeng. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 382. At the top of a tall building in the center of Jade Sea, a pink-haired girl was quietly looking at the dawn battle below where countless people had lost their lives. The scent of blood spreads along the air on the tens of meters tall buildings, indicating the tragedy of the battlefield below. But there was no strange color on the girl's face. She raised her delicate face with her hands and stared blankly into the distance. Suddenly, a black vortex suddenly appeared around the girl, and a slender figure stepped out from the other end of time and space. It wasn't until footsteps sounded behind her that the pink-haired girl was startled. Looking back, a look of surprise suddenly appeared on her face. The cherry-like little mouth opened slightly, and a clear voice like an aureole emerging from the valley came from the girl's mouth. Autumn. Mu Qiu, wearing a black robe, stood beside the girl. Hearing this, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he gently rubbed Lu Qi's soft hair. If the awakened coalition forces below arrive here, they will be surprised to find. Mu Qiuguang just stood there, not feeling the slightest fluctuation of supernatural powers on his body, and he looked just like an ordinary survivor. The whole person seems to be integrated with the surrounding natural space, and people will unconsciously ignore his existence. The girl seemed to want to say something more, but Mu Qiu stretched out her fingers to make a silent gesture. Mu Qiu turned around and looked at the fierce battle at the far wall, and sat down next to Ji Qi as if she didn't care. Watching the brutal battle unfolding from all directions as if watching a play, A faint smile appeared on Mewtwo's lips. I really want to see how many other forces are coveting my territory. After saying that, Mewtwo turned and glanced at several battlefields that emitted destructive fluctuations. They were filled with some of the most powerful combat forces in the Yonjai dynasty. If he had to do everything personally and do everything by himself, what would be the use of recruiting these subordinates? Gradually, Mewtwo's eyes glowed with blood. A bigger plan is brewing in his mind. To the west of the Jade Sea, violent soul fluctuations spread like a wave. The shocking soul energy instantly shredded the souls of the remaining human warriors around. A large number of soldiers around them suddenly fell to the ground, their eyes empty and their eyeballs turned white. And at the center of the soul storm, there were countless figures with happy or sad faces surrounding a girl in a red dress at the same time. The girl's face was pale, and her whole body released terrifying soul pressure to resist the approaching terrorist attacks. Perverted clones wearing tutus were constantly being bombarded and annihilated by powerful soul storms. But then the broken body split into two again and turned into more clones to attack. However, the attacks of these clones have the ability to restrain the soul. When Dire launches the attack, the soul of the main body is also being hurt. Suddenly, a gust of wind sounded behind him, and a figure with a crazy face appeared in front of Dire with his mouth wide open, and his eyes revealed extremely murderous intent. Finally, Jaja, I finally found you. The man raised his sharp claws, and the evil energy condensed with emotional fluctuations on them was about to hit the girl's back. In an instant, a dazzling white light suddenly flashed in the surrounding space. Like the moist rain in early spring, the white light contains a holy and warm atmosphere. Immediately afterwards, this light spread in all directions instantly. I saw a pair of huge palms glowing with white light closing tightly together, protecting the girl in the red dress in their palms. A look of horror flashed in the perverted man's eyes, and the sharp claws that directly hit the soul struck the big hand condensed with white light. Both claws were corroded inch by inch under the illumination of that holy light. Countless clones that were suddenly approaching from the surrounding area also stopped and looked up in horror. I saw an angel silhouette flashing with holy light emerging in mid-air, with a blurred face, and the white light emitting from the whole body seemed to illuminate the most vulnerable part of my heart. The holy angel opened his closed palms, and the figure of Dire in a red dress stepped out. At this moment, a spirit body glowing with white light slowly emerged from under the huge shadow of the angel. This is a silver-haired girl wearing a white dress. The girl in the white dress came to the girl in the red dress with a bright smile on her face. The rescued girl in the red dress turned her head away proudly, but stretched out her delicate little hand unnoticeably. The next moment, two petite girls intertwined their fingers. The white foreheads are pressed together, and the silver and red hair are intertwined, just like twin flowers of the same body, competing to bloom. In an instant, an unparalleled dazzling light shot out, mixed with a huge soul storm. That is. As the fluctuations became more powerful, the figures of the two girls gradually disappeared under the holy angel. Instead, the shadow of the holy angel above their heads became more and more solid, and a coquettish red and white flower actually rose from the hands they held in their hands. Invisible and transparent pollen spread in all directions, and all the perverted clones that came into contact with the pollen had horrifying and ugly pustules on their bodies. What the hell is this? Countless clones of the Yasha twins developed ugly pustules, and the first thing they felt was their bodies being extremely itchy. Before they could reach out to scratch, the pustules began to swell rapidly. Just like seeds that have absorbed sufficient nutrients, the thorny roses break through the skin and spread and grow on the body. Under the horrified eyes, countless monstrous rose vines spurted out from the body, and the bright red color on them was like the blood flowing in the body. Soul-eating butterfly emperor and holy angel? What on earth is going on? In the command room thousands of miles away, Zhou Xiang stared in disbelief at the painful and ferocious expression on the face of Yasha's clone on the screen. Rose vines that are constantly winding around the body take root and grow, as if they want to absorb all the blood nutrients in the host's body. However, the twin flowers held by the holy angel are still blooming quietly, and are extremely beautiful. The situation that should have been perfectly restrained by the abilities of the Yasha twins was actually broken by the sudden appearance of the holy angel. Damn! Due to excessive excitement, Zhou Xiang's empty voice became a little deeper. Just as he was thinking about asking other destruction-level experts for support, a rush of messages suddenly rang. Zhou Xiang, still angry, picked up the microphone. This was the awakening team sent to the rear of Yuhei to carry out the Owl Leader plan. Just as he raised the microphone, a painful wail suddenly came from inside. What's going on? Zhou Xiang's mouth was filled with emotions unconsciously. A man's hoarse shouting came from the microphone. Xiao, the operation failed, please, ask for support. Zhou Xiang frowned, an elite team composed of hundreds of awakened people. What's more, there were several S-class awakened people inside, how could they be defeated so quickly? He asked, how many people did the other party send? Only one person. Zhou Xiang's pupils shrank suddenly. What? In a deep alley southeast of Yuhei, a scarred man with wounds all over his body shouted anxiously. There is only one person on the other side, and his whole body is wrapped in bandages. Everyone in the team was killed in his hands, please support. Before he finished speaking, a sharp bandage with shining metallic luster flew out and instantly struck the scarred man on the head. A fountain of blood spurted out, and the man's headless body staggered to the ground. A woman's sickly laughter could be heard vaguely in the air. Kikik. Deep in the alley where the light cannot reach, I saw a figure with bandages all over its body, leaning against the corner. The originally white bandage has been stained with bright red blood, and only one eye still retains bloodthirsty murderous intent. The bandaged figure stretched out her delicate tongue and licked it in the air. Feeling the exciting bloody taste made her particularly excited. At her feet, countless mutilated corpses lay. Blood continued to gush out from the broken body and gradually gathered into a pool of blood. Why do I feel like I'm still not enjoying myself enough? A woman's coquettish voice came from the deep alley, and the sick voice was filled with the crazy meaning of killing. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 383. When the battle situation changed in several places, the Holy Spear on the other side of the battlefield also received the news at the same time. I know. Putting down the communicator, Wang Hong looked at the huge energy fluctuations coming from afar, and his face was slightly condensed. He did not feel too surprised about the defeat of the Ghost Twins. Long before the Battle of Dawn began, they had expected that the Eternal Night Dynasty would not be an easy opponent. However, their total combat power is more than that. Looking at the sky that was about to dawn in the distance, this war has lasted too long. And the main lord they wanted to attack this time, the master of the Eternal Night Dynasty, the Lord of the Eternal Night, has not yet appeared. Can't delay any longer. Wang Hong turned his head and looked at a pale young man beside him. Alan, it's up to you to do it next. The young man named Alan beside him followed Wang Hong's gaze, and the far end of his sight was the center of the Jade Sea with tall buildings. Alan nodded, and Wang Hong immediately ordered the allied soldiers behind him, Tianlai Novel Network. All the rest of you follow behind, and launch a large-scale attack as planned. Looking at the huge damaged wall, Wang Hong's eyes flickered with stars. This time, we must defeat Yuhei's defense line in one fell swoop. A thin and pale Alan stood in place, then stretched out his hand and suddenly bit down on his elbow. In an instant, a majestic bloody energy rose and surged, and the huge bloody energy attracted the attention of the zombies fighting around. Roar. Accompanied by a roar that shook the earth, the heart-shaking roar echoed over Yuhei. A blood-armored giant with a body as big as tens of meters rose from the ground in a blood mist. With madness in his eyes, the giant took a big step and shook the ground, rushing towards the severely damaged wall in the north of Yuhei. In an instant, under the impact of the giant's flesh and blood, the already damaged tall wall collapsed completely. In a burst of smoke and dust, the hideous blood-armored giant rushed directly into the Yuhei base. As the metal wall dozens of meters high collapsed, countless humans were buried under the collapsed broken wall. And the zombies and shadow monsters fighting with many coalition forces outside the Yuhei periphery had not had time to meet. They were crushed and trampled by the heavy footsteps of the blood-armored giant like iron hooves, turning into a pool of blurred flesh and blood. In front of this completely unequal body size, even the zombie's indestructible body can't withstand the blood-armored giant's tremendous force. The blood-armored giant transformed by Alan roared loudly, and the earth collapsed with a punch, and countless lives were crushed and annihilated. There was a flash of madness in his eyes. At this moment, there was only an uncontrollable violent thought in his mind. He turned around and bombarded an extremely tall building. However, the next second, the huge fist swung by the blood-armored giant stopped in mid-air and suddenly stagnated. It was a huge palm made of quicksand like a huge wave, which perfectly restrained the fist of the blood-armored giant. The blood-armored giant looked up and saw that not far in front of him, the sky was full of yellow sand flying and sweeping. The quicksand spreading in the air gradually condensed into a human-shaped phantom tens of meters high. A pair of red pupils were particularly eye-catching in the sweeping quicksand, and the human-shaped outline condensed by the yellow sand became more and more solid. The giant condensed by the quicksand restrained the fist of the blood-armored giant with one hand. The other arm, also made of yellow sand, blasted towards the hideous face of the blood-armored giant. Roar. The blood-armored giant felt pain, and the madness in his eyes became even worse. In an instant, he started a fierce fight with the quicksand giant. One punch hit another, and the two huge giants tens of meters high started a fierce fight in mid-air. A storm swept across the land below the quicksand giant, and a tall figure slowly walked out of the diffuse yellow sand. Wearing a set of bronze armor, the cracks on Zhang Yuan's face became deeper and deeper, and a terrifying energy wave emanated from his body. This scene was recorded by a drone in the distance. In the coalition command room thousands of miles away, Zhou Xiang's body leaned forward uncontrollably. Looking at Zhang Yuan's figure, a flash of surprise flashed in his eyes. How is it possible? Another destruction level. Inside the wall of the Yuhei base, Zhang Yuan, who was controlling the quicksand giant and the blood armor giant to fight fiercely, had a deep look in his eyes, standing there like a rock. Originally, it would be difficult for him to reach the destruction level in a short period of time with his strength. But until Mu Qiu sent someone to give him a broken and charred corpse. A corpse containing the blood of the dragon clan, which was about to break through to the destruction level. After absorbing all the essence in the corpse, Zhang Yuan successfully broke through to the destruction level. Zhang Yuan raised his head. The load of energy in his body caused more and more cracks on his face. He said in a hoarse voice, "I promised that I would protect the city." This was his promise to Mu Qiu, and also his promise to his wife who had turned into a zombie. At the same time, a fierce battlefield was taking place in another part of the Yuhei base. The flames of war were raging, blood was everywhere, and countless broken corpses were scattered on the ground. The expressions on their faces were all fear of death and unwillingness before death. Ji Yufeng, who was wearing a white suit, was weak, with blood flowing on his forehead, and his glasses were broken and thrown away without knowing when. The neat suit had long been torn, covered with mottled blood, and there were holes of rotten flesh on his body from time to time. Feeling the lack of energy in his body, Ji Yufeng's eyes were fixed on a pool of sticky mucus in front of him. Not far ahead, A pool of disgusting green mucus was feasting on a corpse. By absorbing the remaining vitality in the corpse, the mucus that had recovered some physical strength gradually condensed into a middle-aged man in a tuxedo. The middle-aged man was smiling and had elegant manners. Where was the disgusting mucus just now? There were also several irreparable scars all over his body, and blood was flowing, but Shui Wanhua was much better than Ji Yufeng. Shui Wanhua held a rose in his hand and looked at Ji Yufeng with a smile of appreciation. Well done, it has been a long time since anyone has forced me to this point. Transforming into an ugly mucus was Shui Wanhua's last killer move. In order to maintain his demeanor, he would never show it in front of others. After turning into a green viscous liquid, he will be immune to all physical attacks, and can also devour the vitality in the flesh and blood to restore his physical strength. With this move, he has killed several beings of the same destruction level. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 384. Call. The originally white suit was stained with blood, and his flat chest heaved violently. There was a sense of weakness in his body, and even his vision became a little blurry. He had experienced this familiar feeling not long ago. It was in a dark shadow world, with countless shadow monsters surrounding him, and he was as exhausted as now. His red eyes were full of murderous intent, launching desperate attacks on him from all directions. With your strength, you can be treated as a guest of honor by any human force, so why should you follow that corpse king and become a dead soul in the grave? Shui Wanhua seemed to have a love for talents at this time, and advised Ji Yufeng. Those who are not of my race must have different minds. No matter how powerful the Lord of Eternal Night is, he is still a zombie. A human-eating demon is destined to be killed by our human race. Shui Wanhua's figure moved closer and closer, but Ji Yufeng's expression remained indifferent. What's the difference between your current appearance and that of a zombie monster? The corners of his thin mouth opened and closed, and he said coldly. In this world, the boundaries between humans and corpses have long been blurred. Since the outbreak of the apocalypse, how many people have taken on the guise of humans and done more cruel and evil deeds than zombies? The only thing more terrifying than zombies is the human heart. Even Ji Yufeng himself is no longer a simple human being. Stubborn. Shui Wanhua shook his head, and his body gradually turned into thick mucus again and crawled towards Ji Yufeng. The vision in front of him gradually blurred, and Ji Yufeng's expression became a little dazed. When did he give up his human identity? Were their parents killed after the apocalypse broke out? Or has he become the white god of death who leads the law enforcement team? Memories of the past swirled together in my mind, blurring. In a daze, he recalled in his mind what he had asked Mu Qiu on the rooftop that day. The black-robed figure was smiling, as if all the disasters in the world would be solved in front of him. Under the face covered by white hair, the voice coming out was extremely low, like the whisper of a devil. As long as the balance called law can be corrected, even if it turns into an ugly devil. So what? Suddenly, Ji Yufeng raised his head, and an icy cold light flashed in his eyes. Immediately, an unparalleled space ripple shook around Ji Yufeng. The space shard blade held tightly in his hand had torn the tiger's mouth into pieces, and the tearing pain was felt on his body, but it could not affect him in the slightest. Well, this is it. Shui Wanhua stopped. He suddenly felt a crazy energy riot in Ji Yufeng's body. And the latter's body also undergoes changes at a speed visible to the naked eye. The flesh and blood of Ji Yufeng's jaw instantly shattered, revealing the terrifying white bones, and black curses began to spread on his body, as if they were lingering undead curses. A pair of broad bony wings protruded from the back, and bright red blood stains could still be vaguely seen in the flesh membrane above. There is a pair of transparent bone blades piercing out from the elbows, the blades are sharp and cold. The sudden change in his body caused the clothes on his upper body to explode in an instant, and his muscular body was covered with ferocious criss-crossing scars. These are the endless sufferings he suffered in hell. Even Shui Wanhua, who had experienced many battles in the distance, was slightly startled after seeing Ji Yufeng's sudden change. How much pain did it take to create this scar? Fierce spatial fluctuations tore through the sky, causing hurricanes to howl like the wail of an evil spirit emerging from its cage. At this moment, Ji Yufeng completely transformed into the death demon from hell. And the next moment, Ji Yufeng, with white hair floating in the air and half of his face turned into a skeleton, suddenly raised his head. The wind suddenly rose, like lightning shooting across the sky. In the blink of an eye, Ji Yufeng had already reached the top of Shui Wanhua's head. So fast. Without any time to react, Shui Wanhua directly dissolved his body into mucus form. The next second, the space blade mixed with blood had cut Shui Wanhua's body into thousands of pieces. The splashing mucus contained Shui Wanhua's soul. Just when he was secretly rejoicing that his body had been reunited, an astonishing scene appeared. Space cracks appeared where the space blade cut through. The traces of fragmentation in the surrounding space turned out to be black. It was like black lightning, and a strong suction force was constantly coming from the black space cracks. This strange suction force came out and directly swallowed Shui Wanhua's body that turned into mucus into the chaotic space cracks. Shui Wanhua's miserable screams were heard in his ears, and the body fragments were absorbed by the cracks in the space, which was like dismembering him alive. Not far away, Ji Yufeng, whose body was covered with bloodstains and interlaced scars, was holding a bloodstained space blade. This black thunder-like space crack is the ultimate move he learned after going through many hardships in hell. Dark prison. The ghost-like wail produced by the cutting of space echoed in my ears. Ji Yufeng's expression was cold, and his eyes were full of indifference to life. After a few breaths, Shui Wanhua's figure regrouped, with bright red blood flowing all over his body. The blood stained his tuxedo, and he looked up at Ji Yufeng again. This time, his eyes were filled with fear. To the east of Yuhei, the army led by Wei Ying and Luo Ziyuan was engaged in a fierce battle with the human coalition. The ordinary sound of gunfire was no longer uncommon on this battlefield. The aftermath of the fierce battle between the awakened was more terrifying than gunfire. As the battle became more intense, the human coalition obviously sent several times more troops than Yuhei to force a breakout. Among them, the one who brought the greatest pressure to Yuhei was no longer the powerful S-level awakener. But it was the more terrifying than the S-level, the destruction level. Somewhere on the battlefield, Luo Ziyuan shouted angrily, poured all his energy into the thundering heavy sword in his hand, and swung it forward with all his strength. The huge force suddenly rebounded, and Luo Ziyuan's figure retreated again, and finally he was blasted into the ground under the action of the huge force. He staggered to his feet, and felt a numbness in his hands. The meridians in his limbs were all injured by this blow. Luo Ziyuan looked at the holy spear Wang hung in front of him, who was wearing cloth armor and holding a spear, with a shocked face. He fought with the opponent for several rounds, but the latter did not move an inch. Luo Ziyuan thought that his strength was not weak among the S-level, but he was so vulnerable in front of the opponent. Wang Hong looked at Luo Ziyuan in front of him, did not speak, but suddenly jumped up. The spear in his hand passed through the air with a cold light, and he wanted to kill Luo Ziyuan, who blocked his way instantly. The sharp spear was reflected in Luo Ziyuan's pupils, but his tired body made him unable to dodge. Just as the spear was about to pierce Luo Ziyuan's body, a laser shell carrying huge energy was fired. Wang Hong's pupils condensed while running, as if he felt something, and hurriedly stopped his steps and blocked the ancient spear in his hand in front of his chest. Boom! The destructive light cannon bombarded the spear, and Wang Hong retreated repeatedly under such power. Unexpectedly attacked, Wang Hong retreated several steps, paused and looked to the side. I saw a several-meter-high azure meteor rushing from the air, with wisps of smoke coming out of the cannon barrel of its outstretched right arm. The azure mecha's appearance showed a humanoid outline, but it seemed to be wearing a layer of sky blue battle clothes. The streamlined appearance was even more domineering and powerful, and the strong power it exuded was enough to make people palpitate. And when this mecha appeared, Luo Ziyuan's eyes flashed with horror. Apocalypse Mecha. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 385. Apocalypse Mecha. At the critical moment, a blue mecha several meters high appeared on the battlefield. Luo Ziyuan staggered and stood up, looking at this domineering blue mecha with horrified eyes. This is exactly the holy object held by their resistance army that can fight against destruction-level existences, the Apocalypse Mecha. The Apocalypse Mecha at Zilan base. Wang Heng, who was holding a spear in the distance, came to his senses. He also felt the powerful energy fluctuations coming from the light cannon just now. As the guardian of one side's base, he has naturally heard the legend of the sacred objects in Zilan base. But this is the first time he has faced this rumored mechanical weapon with destructive capabilities. The blue mecha stood upright, and the mechanical shell made of special metal shone with light. Holding a long knife in his left hand, a sense of pressure that was different from ordinary mechas spread. But just inside the mecha's hatch, there was another scene. The interior of this mecha is actually a dark space of several square meters. A girl wearing a purple gauze skirt stood in a dim space. Countless bloody threads were alternately wrapped around her limbs, and her chest exuded colorful light. All the evil energy released from the girl's body was absorbed by this mecha that looked like a living creature. In front of the girl, there is a transparent light curtain floating, and what is shown on it is the mimic model of the Apocalypse Mecha. At this moment, a strange baby voice came from the light curtain. Girl, with your current strength, forcing the mecha to drive will have serious consequences. You have to think clearly. www. The voice on the screen was none other than Zhou Yi, the maker of the Apocalypse Mecha and the leader of the resistance. Shueqianya was concentrating on controlling the mecha. The rapid loss of physical strength left her no time to care too much. She just replied in a cold voice. It doesn't matter, I can hold on. The decisive answer made Zhou Yi outside the light screen shake his head and sigh. Only Shueqianya, who has integrated the Apocalypse Key, can drive and control the Apocalypse Mecha. Shueqianya, who absorbed a lot of evil energy at the Zilan base, naturally rose to S level. While being promoted quickly, it will also cause a series of sequelae. Shueqianya, who has just woken up, has an unstable foundation, let alone controlling such a powerful mecha with destructive capabilities. In the battlefield, Wang Heng glanced at the Apocalypse Mecha and then launched a decisive attack. When facing a weapon of destructive level, he no longer underestimated the enemy, and a simple spear in his hand suddenly flashed with golden light. The roar of some ferocious beast could be faintly heard from the gun, which was shocking. Shueqianya inside the mecha flashed her cold eyes and raised her right hand that was wrapped in blood. The Apocalypse Mecha outside also stretched out its right arm simultaneously. Beams of hot destructive lasers shot out from the cannon barrel on his right arm, one after another blasting at the approaching cloth-armored man. The place where the light cannon hit was desolate, and both the surrounding buildings and the fighting soldiers were all reduced to dregs. Wang Heng held the spear and turned it into a golden light. The speed was surprisingly fast, and it was as fleeting as lightning. After dodging several laser cannons, a golden spear thrust out towards the Apocalypse Mecha like a swimming dragon. Shueqianya hurriedly controlled the mecha to block, and the long knife and the spear exchanged fierce sparks in the air. Just the residual power of the battle caused countless surrounding buildings to collapse and be destroyed. Obviously, the figure of the Apocalypse Mecha is several times taller than that of Wang Heng, and the energy fluctuations are even more powerful. But the huge blue mecha retreated one after another under Wang Heng's fierce offensive. In a moment of confrontation, Wang Heng gradually saw the clues. Although the mecha in front of me has amazing destructive power, it is still completely unable to exert its destructive level strength. Starry eyes flashed, and Wang Heng, who saw this clearly, attacked even more fiercely. The golden spear hit the shell of the Apocalypse mecha one after another, making bursts of roars. The footage of the battle between the Apocalypse mecha and Wang Heng was also transmitted to the screens of major human bases by surveillance drones. Countless survivors looked at this man-machine battle and sighed. Is this the rumored Holy Spear? He is so powerful just by relying on the power of his body. That mecha looks really domineering, but it's still no match for Lord Holy Spear. The Holy Spears have already joined the battlefield. It seems that there is no suspense in this battle. Although the sudden appearance of the Apocalypse mecha disrupted the coalition's original plan. But judging from the current situation, the Apocalypse mecha has no power to resist before the Holy Spear. Kenya. In the upper echelons of Yuhei, Xiao Hanyan, who was dressed in a white military uniform, looked at the tall mecha fighting fiercely with the Holy Spear on the screen, worry flashing in his cold, watery eyes. Next to Xiao Hanyan were Fatty, Zhou Yi and other senior figures belonging to the Yanjai dynasty. At this moment, the men beside him rushed in. Major, enemy signal detected. Xiao Hanyan frowned slightly and waved his hand. The huge light screen in front of me flashed, and a green-haired man in a white coat appeared in the center of the screen. Miss Xiao, the current battle situation is as you can see. Do you still want to defend the Lord of Eternal Night? We are all humans, but we are killing each other here. Are you willing to be driven by a zombie? The Lord of Eternal Night has not shown up yet. Could it be that he has heard the news in advance and escaped? Zhou Xiang's control over the battle situation is very good. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that the Eternal Night dynasty has already declined. In fact, the strength of the Eternal Night dynasty has exceeded the original imagination of the coalition forces. If any of the forces come, they dare not say that they are the opponent of the Eternal Night dynasty. However, the coalition forces of the 6 major bases are attacking the Eternal Night dynasty this time, and there are countless forces in the dark who are eyeing them covetously. Xiao Hanyan snorted coldly, her face as cold as ice. It's just a pretext for you to invade Yuhei. At this moment, the strong aura that once belonged to the Ice Queen was released from Xiao Hanyan again, and her voice was cold and resolute. No matter what the outcome of Yuhei is today, I will live with Yuhei. Live and die together. At this moment, a shocking explosion suddenly came from the edge of the wall in the distance. In an instant, everyone's attention shifted to the direction where the explosion came from. Even Xiao Hanyan and his party, who were far away in the Yuhei Center building, felt the strong explosion. The video signal from the human coalition was cut off instantly. The huge screen showed the scene of the shocking explosion. Under the dawn sky, flames flew, and countless military vehicles and mechas exploded along the way. Thick smoke rose and gushed in the streets, and a demon-like figure slowly stepped out of the sea of fire. A head of scattered white hair fluttered in the wind, and the wide white bone wings were stained with blood, and the bone spurs were clearly visible at the joints. The flesh from the corner of the lip to the lower jaw turned into terrifying and gloomy white bones. The bare body was full of intertwined hideous scars, and the dark curse patterns were engraved all over the body like a curse. The pupils were red, and there was no human color in the cold eyes. The whole person looked like a demon death god walking out of the hell. The white figure stepped out slowly like a wandering undead, and only the slight rise and fall of the chest could make people distinguish the characteristics of life. However, as the white death swung his right hand backward, he dragged a blood-stained man's body. The man's body was torn into pieces, and his tuxedo became tattered and blood-stained. Everyone present recognized the true identity of the body. It was an important figure in the human coalition, the guardian of the Wanhua base, and the lord of Wanhua City, Shui Wanhua. How is it possible that the lord of Wanhua City was defeated by the White Death? The lord of Wanhua city, is dead. At this moment, countless horrified eyes focused on the white figure that walked out of the explosion. So far, the first death of the destruction-level strongman appeared in this long-awaited dawn battle. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 386. Damn it, how could Shui Wanhua's ability not match that white death god? In the command room of Wangcheng Base, Zhou Xiang, with a distorted face, punched the console heavily. The frequent mistakes in the battle plan made him feel a rare sense of frustration. After a while, Zhou Xiang, who had regained his composure, looked at the white figure in the center of the screen again. Ji Yufeng was covered in blood and scars, staggering, almost dragging Shui Wanhua's body to walk. It was unexpected that the white death god could kill the lord of Wanhua city. Now he is already a spent force. Zhou Xiang immediately analyzed Ji Yufeng's physical condition, then picked up the voice transmitter and said to the other side. My lord, the Eternal Night Dynasty has declined, and now you need to take action. In a dark place somewhere in Yuhei Base, Nightmare, who received the news, nodded. After responding, the white mask turned around and looked at the darkness beside him. It's almost our turn. A pair of red eyes opened in the darkness, and a vague voice came out. Has the Lord of Eternal Night not appeared yet? Nightmare looked at the fierce battle below, and the bloody smell continued to spread along the wind. He spoke in a confused voice. He will appear west of the Jade Sea, in the battlefield where the soul storm was raging. There were countless corpses lying around with tragic deaths, and thorny vines were spreading all over the street. These corpses died in extremely tragic ways, and strange rose flowers bloomed on their bodies, and the petals were as red as blood. The gorgeous petals imprisoned countless human souls. In the center of this battlefield, a huge angel shadow stood, holding a red and white flower with the same body in both hands. The transparent pollen continued to spread under the holy light, and all the creatures that were contaminated by the pollen became vases for the roses, and their souls became nutrients for the roses to bloom. What's the matter with these pollens? The figures of the ghostly twins kept retreating along the street, with fear flashing in their eyes. The clones they transformed into were all destroyed by these invisible pollens, and even the origin of their souls was seriously damaged. At this moment, a group of evil spirits surged in, and the figure of Nightmare appeared beside the two. Mr. Nightmare. The two did not know the true identity of Nightmare, but only knew that the latter was also a helper invited by the coalition. Nightmare did not reply, but manipulated the boundless evil spirit filled with evil thoughts to rush towards the pollen that was floating like a wave. The moment a large area of evil spirit came into contact with the soul pollen, it was expelled and dissipated by the holy light emitted by the holy angel. The Nightmare under the mask suddenly groaned, and this light also had a restraining effect on him. But the boundless evil spirit also blocked the sweeping soul storm. Looking at the increasingly blurred twin flowers in the distance, Nightmare forcibly condensed countless evil spirits far away in the sky, exchanging injuries for injuries to fight against the angel phantom. As long as time can be delayed to allow the two women's combination to collapse, this entangled holy angel and twin flowers will naturally be solved. Roar. In the air on the other side, two extremely huge giants were fighting fiercely. The quicksand giant controlled by Zhang Yuan was not afraid of pain. Whenever his body was broken up, quicksand would condense again. The blood armor giant was even more weird. He had obviously shed a lot of blood and was covered with scars. The rising blood made his attack more fierce, and the blood energy emanating from his body became more and more powerful. It was the existence of these two monster-like giants that caused countless buildings around them to collapse in the fight, and the ground under their feet had long been razed to the ground. At this moment, a figure in a light red robe suddenly appeared on the horizon. The hurricane brushed over the brim of his hat, revealing a pair of bloodthirsty red pupils. The figure suddenly raised his hand, and the boundless coldness invaded the air along with the hurricane. The cold air swept through the air, and the giant formed by the quicksand became extremely stiff in the moment of contact with the cold air. Then the quicksand giant froze rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. What? Zhang Yuan secretly thought it was not good, and hurriedly manipulated the quicksand to resist. The blood armor giant immediately seized the opportunity and swung his huge flesh fist to blast out. In an instant, the quicksand giant with frozen body collapsed inch by inch under the bombardment of huge force. Zhang Yuan, wearing armor, rose into the air surrounded by quicksand, with a solemn expression on his dry face. In front of him, the roaring blood armor giant and the red-robed figure controlling ice emitted terrifying energy fluctuations. Two destructive existences. Today's Yuhei is really lively. On the top of the central building of Yuhei, Mu Qiu, wearing a black robe, said with a smile. The breeze blew, and Yu Qi leaned gently on his side without saying a word. She didn't care how fierce the battle below was, as long as Mu Qiu was by her side. It was strange that the two of them were sitting on the top of such a conspicuous high-rise building. But neither the people fighting below nor the people watching in the dark noticed anything unusual. They should be almost all here, right? Mu Qiu narrowed his eyes and counted the destructive existences that appeared on the battlefield. They are really naughty. They came to the host's house as guests and made a mess of the house. As he said that, a dangerous red light flashed in his open eyes. Rubbing the girl's head, Mu Qiu stood up. Since you like to visit Yuhei so much. A black shadow swirled beside him, and a hideous demon mask appeared in front of Mu Qiu. Putting the cold mask on his face, Mu Qiu looked at the fierce battlefield below, and his voice became a little deeper. Then stay here forever. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 387. In the war-torn Yuhei base, the war has entered a white-hot stage. To the west of Yuhei, huge soul fluctuations collided with fierce evil spirits, sweeping wildly around the streets like a wave. A huge angel phantom stood above the street, emitting an incomparably holy light. The angel closed his eyes and held a gorgeous red and white flower in his hand. The flower bloomed, and countless thorny vines spread along the petals along the lines of the petals. Just opposite the holy angel, at the end of the street, the nightmare wearing white masks and the ghost twins released infinite evil spirits and confronted the angel. And with the repeated collision of soul energy, the angel phantom and the red and white flowers in his hands gradually became dim. To the southwest of Yuhei, a giant composed of quicksand in the sky was fighting fiercely with the blood armor giant in front of him. And as the mysterious red-robed figure appeared, the cold air it released actually froze the moving quicksand in an instant. The limbs of the quicksand giant were frozen into ice, and the blood armor giant saw the opportunity and smashed the limbs of the quicksand giant in the most brutal way. Zhang Yuan, who was wearing armor below, could only use his superpowers to condense quicksand to repair the giant. But under the siege of the red-robed man with ice superpowers and the blood armor giant, Zhang Yuan's situation was already extremely passive. The dry cracks on his face spread, and the quicksand swirling around him disappeared more and more. The armor he was wearing had been soaked with large blood stains. On the other side, in the south of Yuhei, Ji Yufeng, who killed the lord of Wanhua city, had already run out of energy. The coalition seemed to have seen his physical condition, and countless awakened people surrounded him covered in blood and launched a round-the-clock attack. There were corpses everywhere, and Ji Yufeng's terrifying body was stained with countless blood, looking like the god of death who walked out of the hell. The soldiers led by Wei Ying and others were beaten back step by step under the pressure of the huge number of coalition forces. If there were no endless black shadow monsters joining the battle underground, Yuhei's defense line would have collapsed long ago. Everything that happened on the battlefield was watched by countless eyes, either bright or dark. The survivors in many human bases who didn't know the truth were amazed, thinking that this force formed by zombies controlling humans would eventually be defeated by the coalition forces. The coalition leaders such as Zhou Xiang were paying close attention to the whereabouts of the Lord of Eternal Night, and they were bound to kill him. And some figures hiding in the dark watched the Eternal Night dynasty show a decline, and were secretly thinking about how to gain the greatest benefits for themselves. In a certain block of Yuhe, a fierce battle between man and machine was going on. Energy artillery fire shot through the streets at dawn, and the aftermath of the explosion razed the buildings of the entire block to the ground. The power of the destructive mecha can be seen. However, the battle scene deep in the block was not optimistic. The Apocalypse mecha controlled by Shueqianya was defeated by the bombardment of the Holy Spear, and the thick metal shell burst into sparks under the attack of the Holy Spear. Shueqianya's reaction could not keep up with Wang Heng's attack rhythm. If it weren't for the amazing defense of the Apocalypse mecha itself, it would probably be destroyed and turned into a pile of debris within a few rounds. Not far away, Luo Ziyuan struggled to stand up several times and tried to join the battle, but he was now just a spent force, seriously injured, and almost lost his life. Wang Heng, wearing cloth armor, hit all his attacks on the huge body of the Apocalypse mecha, and this battle did not even allow him to exert much strength. Although the Apocalypse mecha has amazing destructive power, the operator cannot exert its destructive power. In his eyes, this mecha was nothing more than a heavier grindstone. Finding the right time, Wang Heng's eyes flashed, and he suddenly pulled out the spear in his hand and hit the mecha body. The spear body flashed with golden light, and in an instant, the Apocalypse mecha several meters high was blasted 100 meters away. In the huge pit, Shueqianya staggered forward while controlling the mecha body. The solid mecha shell had already emerged with fine cracks. There were footsteps not far away, and Wang Heng had stepped over with a gun, with a puzzled look on his face. "I am very curious, what method did the Lord of Eternal Night use on you, which is worth you sacrificing your life to protect a zombie?" In his opinion, these rebellious humans were controlled and bewitched by the Zombie King, so they would fight against their own kind. Shueqianya in the cabin space did not respond, and her eyes were as deep as a pool of stagnant water. She just slowly raised her hand and concentrated the little energy in her body on the right arm of the Apocalypse mecha. "The flashing energy cannon has given the answer." Wang Heng shook his head regretfully, and the golden spear in his hand faintly let out a beast-like roar. There was a violent burst of energy around him, and just as Wang Heng was about to throw the spear in his hand, the huge mecha in the distance disappeared without a trace. Layers of water rippled in the surrounding space. Wang Heng's eyes flashed, illusion. He suddenly closed his eyes, his ears moved slightly, and the next second he threw the golden spear in his hand directly in a certain direction. A sound of broken lenses suddenly came from above the street hit by the spear in the distance. Then, a fiery red and beautiful body flew out and hit the wall next to it. The Apocalypse mecha that faced this blow was directly destroyed and paralyzed below the waist and abdomen. The hatch on the abdomen was opened, and the petite Shueqianya popped out of the mecha, her face pale. Little tricks. 6 fiery red foxtails condensed with supernatural energy hung down, and Lukinkin's bloody body was revealed from the debris of the collapsed building. A fierce light flashed in Wang Heng's eyes, and the spear in the distance was pulled back under an invisible suction force. The beast's soul contained in the spear roared crazily, as if it would swallow up the soul in front of him in the next second. However, at this moment, a melodious song suddenly echoed over the city. The prelude suddenly sounded like a girl's low moan, followed by a burst of melodious singing. The girl's chant was very soft, but it echoed clearly in the ears of everyone on the battlefield, reaching straight into the heart, making people sink into it unconsciously. "Abandoned ruins, still beautiful. I have been here, waiting for your return. Hold tightly, that forget-me-not." This song is Everyone who heard the singing looked towards the source of the sound. In a building on the highest floor of Yuhei Center, there is a beautiful girl with pink hair. The girl closed her eyes, her delicate body trembled slightly, and sang a shocking song. The singing that gradually became louder carried an indescribable sense of oppression, as if it was welcoming the arrival of a king. The familiar singing voice came, and Xiao Hanyan, a senior member of Yuhei, moved slightly. As if he had thought of something, his frown slightly relaxed, he looked at the battlefield in the distance and said softly, "He's back." Somewhere in the battlefield, Ji Yufeng seemed to sense something, and his indifferent eyes suddenly looked in another direction. The bandage killer who was originally fighting in the deep alley trembled, and looked into the distance with his trembling single eye. Along with the singing, a burst of light footsteps suddenly sounded deep in the city. That's... Everyone turned their attention to the direction where the footsteps sounded. Shrouded in black mist, a tall figure wearing a black robe and a ferocious demon mask was seen walking slowly out of the darkness of the city. In the countless eyes that were either horrified or shocked, the black-robed figure wearing a demon mask seemed to have stepped onto an invisible staircase. He walked slowly and looked around, as if he were a supreme king inspecting his territory. Arriving at the center of the battlefield, the figure stopped. He glanced below with a look that looked down on the world, and said in a low voice with a hint of teasing, "Welcome to my kingdom. Eternal Night Dynasty." In an instant, the whole place was dead silent. At this moment, both on and off the screen, or on the battlefield, all eyes, bright or dark, were focused on a figure. They knew that what appeared in front of them was the ultimate goal of their battle. He is also the leader of the Corpse King who rules the Eternal Night Dynasty with absolute strength. Lord of Eternal Night. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 388. The black flame robe and the devil's mask are unmistakable, he is the one in the legend. Lord of Eternal Night. The Battle of Dawn is coming to an end, has he finally appeared. The main force of the Yanjai dynasty is already at the end of its strength. Even if the Corpse King takes action in person, it is impossible for him to withstand the siege of several destruction-level powerhouses. The voices of discussion sounded quietly in the dark, and one after another looked at the domineering figure either in horror or greedily. But many coalition forces below have already responded immediately. Before the battle was over, countless powerful awakened people put down their opponents, and all moved towards the direction of the demon mask to encircle and suppress them. This was the first order they received long before they participated in the battle. When the Lord of Eternal Night appears, gather all your strength and surround him at all costs. In an instant, under the earth, above the sky, in the sky. Countless huge energy fluctuations are coming from all directions with fierce murderous intent. But the figure surrounded by countless murderous intentions didn't make any move. The round earth beneath the feet seemed to be splashed with a layer of ink, and the dark earth seemed to be alive and ready to move. Immediately afterwards, countless dark shadows emerged from the depths of the dark earth. These figures have different shapes, but they all have a pair of extremely red eyes. Monsters from the Shadow Kingdom. The next second, countless shadow monsters attacked and killed the awakened people pouring in from all directions. These shadow monsters are much stronger in number and strength than the shadow soldiers who resisted the coalition forces. More and more awakened people put down their opponents and turned towards the Lord of Eternal Night to attack. In an instant, the shadow monsters and the awakened members of the coalition fought together, and a new round of fierce battle broke out. The shadow monsters stood in front of the coalition forces, and most of the coalition forces were forced to fight against these shadow monsters. However, there are also some awakened ones who are powerful or have weird powers, and their powers frequently attack the masked figure. The ground beneath his feet stirred, and a bloated man who looked like a mole slashed at the black-robed figure with 2 knives. Immediately afterwards, gusts of wind passed by in mid-air, and several assassins found the opportunity to sneak up from behind. The latter looked sideways slightly, the dark red pupils under the mask flickering. A shocking scene happened. I saw assassins from all directions trying to attack the Lord of Eternal Night, but they were not even close to 6 feet away from him. The body was burned by black flames out of thin air, exploding into a pool of blood mist and disappearing in mid-air. This ability is unmistakable. This is the Lord of Eternal Night. Thousands of miles away in the command room, Zhou Xiang stood up directly after seeing the black flame that devoured everything. He looked excited, swallowed his throat, and roared. "Everyone, come together, target. Kill the Corpse King. Today, the Lord of Eternal Night will be buried under this dawn." At the same time, the destruction-level entities that were overwhelming all over the Jade Sea also rushed to the Lord of Eternal Night at the same time. With the turbulent rush of the coalition forces below, it also indicates that this war is about to come to its final conclusion. Countless figures were hiding in the darkness of the mountain Col on the back of Yuhe, watching this shocking battle and waiting for the opportunity. At the corner of the mountain, white space ripples flashed past. Hiss. Accompanied by a long neighing sound of horses, 2 figures crossed the space barrier and set foot on the top of the Jade Sea Mountain. "Miss, the Master has already told me to take good care of you. This is a dangerous battlefield where life can be lost if you're not careful. It's best that we don't set foot on it." An old man with a stooped body was holding a white horse in his hand and followed the woman carefully, admonishing her earnestly. The woman next to her was wearing a light skirt, with a high ponytail tied behind her head. Her facial features were exquisite, and her temperament was as ethereal as a fairy. Just on the woman's chest, there is a dark green jade pendant. As if guiding something, the patterns on the jade pendant flashed, emitting an extremely bright light. The woman is Yefanyan, who traveled across space and came from thousands of miles away to the dawn battlefield. Yefanyan stared blankly at the raging battlefield down the mountain, and the old man's advice came to his ears. "Miss, now is not the time for joking. You must know that this is a war between digital destruction level beings, including the Corpse King. There is no guarantee that it will not affect us. If the Lord of the city knew that you had gone to a place like this without permission, how could you let me do this?" Seeing Yefanyan's appearance, the old man thought it was his young lady's old problem that had relapsed, and looked anxious. Yefanyan came back to his senses for a moment, but shook his head at the old man. "Uncle Fu, I'm fine." Subconsciously, she clenched the dark green jade pendant on her chest. In front of her was a fierce battlefield called Dawn. At the same time, it is also the territory that belongs to the Yanjai dynasty in this era. Yefanyan licked her dry lips, looked down, and said firmly, "There are some things that I must personally prove." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 389. What is it like to be surrounded by tens of thousands of people? All coalition forces on the battlefield received orders after the black-robed figure appeared. Kill him at all costs. The huge army turned into a wave and attacked from all directions. The figures of pitch-black monsters emerged from the ground and instantly fought fiercely with the attacking coalition forces. And the Lord of Eternal Night, surrounded by countless black shadows, is like a godless king who dominates the battlefield. Under the ferocious demon mask, a pair of sharp red eyes carried a domineering air. Looking at more and more figures speeding towards the surrounding ruins, the dark red pupils under the mask of the black-robed figure flickered. There are 6 megatamas circling in each eye, forming a pattern like two blood moons overlapping and intertwined. He suddenly looked up to the distant sky, and the rising sun was faintly visible in the dawn sky. Immediately afterwards, the famous Corpse King suddenly did something that no one expected. He suddenly rose into the sky, his robes made of black flames fluttering under the hurricane. The next moment, a whirlpool of red flames suddenly appeared in front of the Lord of Eternal Night standing in the sky. Without any hesitation, the Lord of Eternal Night stepped into the boundless hell of fire. Just when everyone was looking in panic, a fiery red figure stepped out of the whirlpool. Stepping out of the whirlpool of flames was a handsome man they had never seen before. His long dark red hair spreads to his waist, his body is slender and tall, his nose is straight, his lips are thin, and his appearance is even more handsome than ordinary people. There is a look of disdain for all things in the world in his deep red eyes. The whole body is wrapped with silky black flames, and the whole body exudes an indescribable evil temperament. The moment the man's figure appeared, there was a faint dragon roar in the void. I saw a giant crimson dragon emerging from the flames, turning into a beam of light and penetrating into the body of the man who suddenly appeared. Immediately afterwards, a set of blood-red armor appeared on the red-haired man. The armor, which was as hot as lava, was engraved with strange patterns, and the fit of the armor highlighted the man's perfect figure. There was a blood-red gem inlaid on the chest of the armor, which faintly exuded heart-stopping energy fluctuations. The red-haired man pushed away the flames, with an evil smile on his lips, and stood in the air, looking down at all living beings. This is what Mu-Chiu turned into after devouring the soul of Zilong and transforming the blood in her body. The true form of Zilong. But this scene shocked everyone who looked at the picture. The mysterious and domineering Lord of Eternal Night magically penetrated the layers of flames. They even thought that the Corpse King could not stand the pressure of the coalition forces and tried to escape. But what emerged from the flames was this handsome man with a strange appearance and an evil temperament in front of him. That's Mu-Chiu. Among the higher UPS in Yuhei, Xiao Hanyan dropped all orders when the Lord of Eternal Night appeared, until the red-haired man stepped out of the flames. She stared straight at the strange, charming, and handsome face on the battlefield. Although his face was very different from before, the smile at the corner of his mouth made Xiao Hanyan extremely familiar. Is this the true face of the Lord of Eternal Night? Including the gazes of those watching secretly, everyone's attention was attracted by the evil man who was the incarnation of the Lord of Eternal Night. Different from the erratic aura of the black-robed figure before, the evil man's body at this moment was exuding heart-stopping terrifying fluctuations. A pair of blood-red eyes looked around, with Megatama circling in them. Looking at the crowd, I felt an inexplicable feeling of suffocation welling up in my heart. On the top of the mountain with the Jade Sea behind it, Yefanyan stared blankly at the charming man walking out of the flames, and his voice began to tremble unconsciously. Is that the Lord of Eternal Night? In her former world, the title of Lord of Eternal Night was an unmatched legend. And returning to the present thousands of years ago, her mission is to fight against this legend who awes countless people. She stared at the evil figure with red hair, and her breathing became a little heavier. At this moment, the sky where the Lord of Eternal Night was located seemed to be connected by an invisible staircase. The evil man in red armor walked slowly in the invisible air, raised the corners of his mouth and said softly, "Return to darkness." The red rough stone on the chest of the armor instantly cracked a gap. It was as if a peerless ferocious beast suddenly opened its eyes. In an instant, a blood-red light saturates the entire world. Everyone looked up in surprise, and saw that just after the bloody light flashed, the entire sky instantly turned gloomy. Gradually, with the Jade Sea as the center and a radius of hundreds of miles, the originally dawn sky turned into a deep night again. What's going on? The sky is darkening. In an instant, the dawn sky turned into eternal night again. Everyone looked up at the sky shrouded in darkness in horror, and for some reason there was an inexplicable fear in their hearts. One thought of Tianyan, This kind of power. In the darkness of the distant street, the nightmare scanned the evil man transformed by the Lord of Eternal Night and the dark sky one after another. As if he thought of something, a bright light flashed under the white mask. "Do it!" At this moment, a shout suddenly came from somewhere. Huge energy fluctuations suddenly came from all directions around Mu-Chiu. Roar! There was a shocking roar, followed by a blood-armor giant tens of meters tall rushing across the sky, and countless buildings collapsed under its feet. All the shadow soldiers in the surrounding area who tried to stop him were immediately hit by a huge force, and their bodies exploded into balls of black energy that dissipated. The blood-armor giant has a ferocious face, holding on to the overwhelming force of gravity as he swings his giant fist towards the Lord of Eternal Night in the distance. Mu-Chiu turned her head to look at the powerful fist, with 6 megatama circles in her pupils, and the blood moon overlapped. Black flames surged majestically behind him, and a giant skeleton with red flames and black energy all over its body rose from the ground. The skeleton giant stretched out its fist wrapped in flames and collided with the blood-armor giant. In an instant, the wind suddenly rose, and at this moment, several sharp claws blew from both sides of Mu-Chiu. 2 charming men's faces suddenly appeared on the left and right. One of them looked crazy, and the other looked sad, but at the same time, they flashed to Mu-Chiu's sides and stretched out those cold claws. Court death. Mu-Chiu snorted coldly, her eyes red with blood. His arms suddenly stretched out to both sides, one hand ignited with red bursting flames, and the other hand condensed into icy frost. Just like that, the palms wrapped in flames and ice instantly grasped the sharp claws of the Yasha twins. The faces of the Yasha twins simultaneously showed an unprecedented look of shock. Their sharp claws that can penetrate the soul cannot penetrate fire and ice at all. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 390. Then, the flames in the left hand and the ice in the right hand spread and exploded at the same time, and the heat and coldness burned the minds of the ghost twins in an instant. At the same time, a cold wind swept behind Mu-Chiu. A figure wearing a light red robe suddenly appeared behind Mu-Chiu. As the robe fluttered, a skinny arm covered with gray hair stretched out and suddenly grabbed Mu-Chiu's back. A gloomy cold air spread out, and the earth was covered with frost under the invasion of the cold air. Even the temperature around dropped a few degrees in this extreme cold air. This is actually a destructive existence of the ice element. Just as the gray skinny arm was about to approach, a deafening tiger roar suddenly came from the rolling black flames behind Mu-Chiu. A giant tiger with a body made of black flames roared out from the rolling black air, baring its fangs and rushing towards the red-robed figure with ferocious eyes. A sharp spear light cut through the sky and stabbed straight at Mu-Chiu's chest. Behind the golden spear light, a pair of deep starry eyes were releasing undisguised murderous intent. Holy Spear Wang Hung. The roar of some kind of ferocious beast was faintly heard from the golden spear body, and the already powerful ancient spear was greatly powerful. However, before stabbing the vital point of the Lord of Eternal Night, a layer of blood-colored barrier suddenly appeared on the latter's chest, rippling like the howling of a ghost. The ancient spear was wrapped in the power of the prehistoric beast and bombarded the blood-colored barrier, but was blocked by blood energy in the first time. As the blood-colored barrier appeared cracks under the bombardment of the spear, Wang Hung also looked at the evil man in front of him through the blood-colored mist. When the 4 eyes met, Wang Hung frowned, but what he saw in the other's eyes was a wild and wanton smile with a bit of playfulness. The crowd below was stunned by this scene. The red-haired man stood in the air, and a giant skeleton with black flames burning all over his body collided with the blood-armor giant's fists above his head. With his arms stretched out, the faces of the ghostly twins were distorted in the explosion of flames and ice. The red-robed figure who attacked from behind was attacked by the nether evil tiger that rushed out of the black flames. Even the holy spear was intercepted by the blood-colored barrier that suddenly appeared. Under the siege of 5 destructive level masters, the evil-looking red-haired man was unscathed. Has the strength of the Lord of Eternal Night reached this point? Just as the golden light on the holy spear was about to break through the cracked blood-colored barrier, the black flames of the Lord of Eternal Night exploded, like a shocking nuclear explosion, and countless figures around him were annihilated in the flames. Even the 5 destruction-level warriors who besieged the Lord of Eternal Night retreated under the powerful explosion of black flames. The surrounding building ruins have been completely burned, and the wasteland is burning with long-lasting black flames. In the scattered dust, Wang Heng, holding the holy spear, emerged, and looked at Mu Qiu with a little more fear. A pair of starry eyes flashed with determination. Wang Heng, who was standing on the ground, looked at Mu Qiu who was standing in the air, and asked, "Lord of Eternal Night, you are a corpse king, but you sneaked into the human race and drove our human race to kill each other. Your intentions are sinister and you deserve to be killed." Wang Heng's voice was decisive and instantly resonated with many human coalition forces. Yes, their mission this time is to destroy the Corpse King and eliminate future troubles for the human race. Justice is always on their side. Destroy the Corpse Clan and return my people. In the battlefield, a loud shout suddenly sounded from somewhere. Then, the entire battlefield was filled with the angry voices of the human coalition. Destroy the Corpse Clan and return my people to me. Under the gloomy night sky, Mu Qiu looked at the many angry humans below, and a smile suddenly appeared on his evil face. The next second, he suddenly laughed wildly, and his handsome face laughed even more wildly. The teasing laughter instantly made the coalition forces on the battlefield look confused. After a few breaths, Mu Qiu put away his smile and looked around the tragic battlefield below. Humans always like to put themselves in a high position and think they are above all living beings. But don't forget that the premise of considering all so-called status is strength. He suddenly raised his hand, clasped his 5 fingers together, and the blood red in his eyes became deeper. From today on, the laws of the world will be overturned again. Watch carefully, this is miracle. Before he finished speaking, the blood moon jade deep in Mu Qiu's pupil suddenly shrank, and his pupil power was also raised to the extreme in an instant. Infinite evil black air was released from his right eye, and the earth seemed to be covered with a layer of black ink, and countless black figures emerged from the abyss underground. And as the black air continued to pour in, the bodies of these black shadows became more and more solid. The pupil technique contained in the right eye oracle. At this moment, Mu Qiu's left eye suddenly burst into a strange blood-red light, and the depths of his pupil seemed to reflect the entire world. The entire black sky was stained with a touch of blood, and blood-colored spaces cracked in the void around Mu Qiu. Then, countless blood-colored life essences floated out from the blood-colored space and poured into the bodies of the black monsters on the ground. The huge soul energy spread like a wave, and even the nightmare in the distance was moved by the soul fluctuation. These are tens of thousands of soul essences extracted by Zilan base in the God Realm world. However, what is even more shocking is that when these bloody life origins are integrated into the body of the black monster, the figures of these black shadow monsters, which could only be seen in outline at first, gradually became solid. The texture of the skin becomes clearly visible, and even the facial contours of some humanoid monsters become clearer. Different facial features appear on the dark face. The color called consciousness emerged from the depths of a pair of crimson pupils. Under the witness of countless eyes, these irrational shadow monsters turned into some kind of new creatures. These newly born dark creatures all looked up at the red figure in the sky, and made different screams from their mouths. Prone on all fours, his expression was extremely respectful, like a pilgrim. Howls echoed throughout the battlefield, and countless human coalition forces were stunned by this scene. Cold sweat flowed down his forehead, and the horror in his eyes could not be increased. This is the pupil technique in the left eye created by Mu Qiu by combining the ultimate illusion technique of soul fruit and kaleidoscope. The one who can inject the soul essence into the body and give life and independent soul to all things. Return to the ruins. In the Yuhei Mountain Col in the distance, countless figures spying secretly were shocked by the Lord of Eternal Night's methods. A pair of widened pupils were filled with disbelief. The red-haired man in front of me actually created a race. On the top of the mountain, Yefanyan and Uncle Fu also saw the incredible scene happening in the Jade Sea. Black figures emerged from the ground one after another, followed by the integration of blood souls. These black shadows gradually became solid, and the red eyes revealed their consciousness. At this moment, the jade pendant on Yefanyan's chest shone brightly, and a beam of green light shot from the jade pendant into the woman's fair forehead. Yefanyan's eyes suddenly turned green, and a vague memory was recalled from the depths of his mind. The next second, she slowly raised her head to look at the shadowy creatures all over the battlefield, and said indifferently in a mechanized voice. Records of the Yanjai Code. In the first year of Yanjai, the ancestor of Yanjai used his supreme magical power to lead the underworld to the other side, lead the blood soul into the shadow, save the mind, connect to the mysterious world, and create a subordinate that is superior to all races. Royal family. Historical name: Eternal Night Royal Family.